Happy second to last week of school, class. This week we are examining 2 to 3 types of pollution that are present in everyday life in the world. And our first type of pollution that we are going to examine is something called light pollution. Light pollution occurs when you have an overabundance or too much light from municipalities or cities, and that light doesn't go out at the right time. So when we have nighttime and there's too much light around, that tends to disrupt natural patterns of organisms that live around these areas with light pollution. So basically, if you're trying to sleep and you're in a city that is really bright, you are actually going to have disrupted sleep patterns because of an overabundance of light, so to speak. So this article on the right is linked on today's Canvas page. And this is for you to read, and then you will answer subsequent questions from the article that are included on this PDF that you see on the left. Now, this article has some maps in it. It has a map of Europe, and it also has a map of the United States. But the map of Europe is more important right now because this map explains how the map works. So we see Europe's outline in this map, but it's in different types of colors. And so we follow this key over here to figure out what this map of light pollution in Europe is actually telling us about Europe itself. And so it tells you the color code. If you see black, which in this case, anything that's black in this picture is the ocean. If you see black, that means there is no light pollution in that area, which would make sense because we don't have any lost cities of Atlantis lighting up at night, causing a bunch of light pollution in the middle of the Atlantic. So, in this case, if you have blue, that means you have a little bit of light pollution, but not a whole lot. Green, more light pollution than blue. Yellow is more than green. Red is more than yellow. And white is very, very high light pollution. Now, what you'll notice is little captions that explain the progression of light pollution in this map. And if it says Milky Way lost, that means that you cannot see the Milky Way galaxy from your vantage point here on Earth. You don't even need a telescope to see it. So if you can't see it because of too much light pollution, that means your light pollution is relatively high. And then our highest says something about cones active. So to talk about what that exactly means, I'm going to refer to a diagram that I've included on our note on the left, which has your post-reading questions on it. So you'll see a diagram of the human eye as seen from the side. So if you're a human looking into your eyeball, then you are looking into that part of the eye, the front, okay, is seen from here as the side view. So here's your pupil, there's your iris. So that's the pretty part of your eye that is the window to the human soul, and you look straight through it into the anatomy of the human eye. So what happens after that is this schematic of the human eye shows you how it works. The eye is basically a glorified mirror, okay? What it does is it takes light from a source and it reflects it off the back of the eye and then projects it back onto anything that you're seeing. So your eye is a mirror that takes light inward, bounces it back, and that's how you actually see things. So how does it do that? This back of the eye, which is called the cones and rods, okay, it's seen in your retina. The cones and rods, which compose the retina, are shown here. And it's actually quite simple. If it looks conical in structure, such as here, 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 and here, that would be a cone. If you're looking at a rod, that means it's a rod-shaped structure like that, okay? What's the point with this? The cones are responsible for reflecting light that is bright. So anytime that you see something that causes you to kind of squint because the light is so bright, such as the sun, that means that the cones are what are reflecting the light back in your eye. So if your cones are active, that means that your eyes are processing and reflecting bright light. If your rods are active, that means that it's kind of dark out and you're processing an environment that doesn't have a lot of light. So if light pollution is high, your cones will be active because they're seeing relatively bright light and reflecting it back out of the eye. okay? So if your cones are active, that means that it's bright outside. So here's what we do. We read this article, and I want to refer to the map of the United States now before I leave you. So this article is going to tell you some information that the questions in the notability note on the left will address. And in one of these, it involves you trying to find Noblesville, Indiana, okay? Right here. Are our cones active, meaning is it bright around Noblesville, Indiana? Some of you who are not fluent in United States geography, I'm going to kind of help you find Noblesville here. If you know Indiana, Indiana is going to be found right here where I'm kind of hovering. So right there is Lake Michigan, that dip of blue coming downward. Now, that really big splotch of pink, white, and red to the lower left-hand corner of that blue inlet would be Chicago, okay? So if that's Chicago, that tells us that Indianapolis is the next biggest red and white dot that is to the lower right-hand corner of Chicago, okay? So Indianapolis has a large white and red spot. So if Indianapolis has a lot of light pollution because it has white and red, which are our two highest levels of light pollution, what would that lead you to think of Noblesville, which is right next to it? It means that we probably have a significant amount of light pollution. Maybe not quite as bad as Indianapolis, but pretty close to it. So that would help you figure out whether or not our cones are in fact active due to excess light pollution in Noblesville. Now, other than that, the rest of this is for you to read and answer certain questions. And so this article is going to actually tell you some ways that we can reduce light pollution as well, which is important because you'll see the harmful effects that come from too much light in a certain area. And then at the end of this reading, you cannot find answers to this question number 9 in the reading because you have to do it. I'm curious. I want you, before you go to bed, to record the time at which you see your last screen before you go to bed. So how late are you on a screen at night? Because screens are sources of light pollution. The next thing that I want you to do is tell me the number of stars right before you go to bed. Go outside if the weather is fair and try to count how many stars you see before you actually go to bed. And so based on this information, we can also see from observation how light pollution is in our hometown. And then submit to Canvas, and then tune in on Wednesday for water pollution.